the day Earth arrived. For 300 million years, the Galactic Council had operated under a single, unshakable truth. Civilizations evolved slowly. It was a law as certain as gravity. Species crawled from their oceans, learned to build fires, fought their tribal wars, and, if they survived their own violence, eventually looked up at the stars. The journey from stone tools to starships took time. Millennia. Sometimes epochs. The Council had seen it happen 1,000 times across 1,000 worlds. They knew the pattern by heart. First came radio signals, crude and chaotic, bleeding into space like the babbling of infants. Then came satellites, clumsy and fragile. Decades later, perhaps a probe. A century after that, maybe a colony on a nearby moon. The Council watched these steps with patience, cataloging each species, marking their progress, waiting for the day they would be ready to join the greater galaxy. Earth had been catalog entry 7-749 Epsilon. Quarantined. Observed. Noted as potentially viable pending maturation. The file had been clear. Homo sapiens showed promise but also problems. Fractured governance. Persistent tribalism. A concerning tendency toward self-destruction. The consensus was unanimous. Earth needed at least another 500 years before first contact. Maybe 1,000. Perhaps never. No one expected them to arrive early. And no one expected them to arrive like this. The Council chamber hung in the void between stars, a structure older than most civilizations in the galaxy. Its walls were formed from crystallized spacetime itself, shimmering with the light of 1 billion distant suns. Inside, representatives from 47 species sat in their designated alcoves, their forms as varied as the worlds they came from. The Velthri floated in spheres of liquid methane. The Korth stood on 6 legs, their carapaces gleaming like polished obsidian. The YSS Kara, beings of pure energy, flickered and pulsed in containment fields. They had gathered here for 3,000 years, deliberating on matters of trade, territory, and the slow turning of galactic civilization. Today's agenda had been routine. Then the alarms began. At first, it was a whisper, a fluctuation in the quantum sensors at the edge of Council space. Then a tremor. Then a roar of displaced energy that sent every detection grid in the sector into panic mode. Unscheduled warp signature detected, announced the chamber's AI, its voice calm despite the impossibility of what it was reporting. Origin unknown. Scale, unprecedented. The gathered species turned toward the central holo display as it flickered to life. What they saw defied explanation. A fleet. Not a single ship. Not a diplomatic shuttle making a cautious approach. A fleet, 300 vessels strong, emerging from slipspace in perfect formation. Their hulls were angular and aggressive, built from alloys the sensors couldn't identify. Energy signatures radiated from their cores, powerful and efficient in ways that shouldn't be possible for a species Earth's age. Identify those ships, commanded High Arbiter Cuven, a towering figure whose species had mastered interstellar travel when Earth's ancestors were still learning to walk upright. The AI hesitated. In 300 million years of operation, it had never hesitated. Origin confirmed, it finally said. Homeworld Sol, 3. Designation, Earth. Silence. The kind of silence that falls when the universe stops making sense. That's impossible, whispered Ambassador Reth of the Korth Dominion. We have Earth under observation. They barely have fusion reactors. Their space program is still in its infancy. This cannot be real. But it was real. The fleet held position, neither advancing nor retreating. And then, with a precision that made every military strategist in the chamber tense, the ships parted. A single vessel moved forward, sleek, elegant, and utterly confident. A transmission request appeared on every council member's screen. They're hailing us, the AI reported. Cuven's many eyes narrowed. Open the channel. The holographic display shifted, and for the first time in galactic history, a human face appeared before the Galactic Council. She was young by human standards, mid-30s perhaps, with dark skin, sharp eyes, and an expression that suggested she knew exactly how impossible this moment should be. She wore a uniform of deep blue and silver, and behind her, the bridge of her ship hummed with quiet efficiency. Greetings, she said, her voice steady and clear. I am Admiral Keisha Okonkwo, representing the United Earth Collective. We come in peace, seeking formal recognition and membership in the Galactic Council. Another silence. Longer this time. It was Ambassador Silith of the Contemplative Order who finally spoke, her telepathic voice resonating in every mind present. Oh. Admiral Okonkwo smiled, a small, knowing expression that sent a chill through the chamber. "We've been listening," she said simply, "for a very long time. You marked us as unready, divided, dangerous. You weren't wrong. But you made one miscalculation." She leaned forward slightly, and her eyes seemed to look directly at each council member at once. "You assumed we would wait for your permission." High Arbiter Cuven felt something he had not experienced in centuries: uncertainty. Earth's file had been updated only months ago. Primitive propulsion, limited spaceflight capability, political fragmentation. And yet here they stood, unified, advanced, and waiting at the gates of galactic civilization with the confidence of equals. "Explain yourselves," Cuven demanded. "How did you achieve this level of technology? Who shared it with you?" "No one," Okonkwo replied. "We built it ourselves." "Impossible. Your species lacks the necessary." "We learned," she interrupted, and there was steel in her voice now. "We listened to your transmissions. We studied your physics. We unified our world not because it was easy, but because the alternative was extinction. And when we were ready, we didn't ask if we could join you." She paused, letting the weight of her words settle. "We simply came." The chamber erupted. The debate that shook the stars. The Galactic Council had weathered wars, cosmic disasters, and the collapse of entire star systems. But it had never faced anything quite like this. A species that refused to follow the rules no one had bothered to write down. For 3 hours, the chamber descended into chaos. The Vel-3 delegation argued for immediate quarantine. "They are unpredictable," their spokesperson bubbled through translation fields. "A species that advances this rapidly is inherently unstable. We cannot allow them access to our networks, our worlds, our knowledge. History teaches us that fast-rising civilizations burn brightest before they collapse." The Korth Dominion took a harder stance. Ambassador Reth's carapace gleamed under the chamber's light as he spoke, his voice resonating with barely controlled anger. "This is not mere advancement. This is espionage. They admitted to listening to our transmissions, stealing our scientific data, reverse engineering our technology. They have violated every principle of ethical development. We should treat them as what they are, thieves and infiltrators." But not everyone agreed. Counselor Mira of the Lysan Commonwealth, a species known for its philosophical approach to galactic affairs, raised a delicate hand. Her voice was soft, but it cut through the noise like a blade. "Or perhaps they are exactly what we claim to value: survivors, learners, innovators. Is it theft to listen to signals we broadcast freely into space? Is it a crime to be clever enough to understand what we assumed only we could comprehend?" "It is a crime to lie," Reth snapped back. "They concealed their progress. They watched us watching them and they let us believe they were harmless. That is deception." "That," Mira countered, "is strategy." High Arbiter Cuven raised his primary appendages, and the chamber fell silent. His species had led the council for 50,000 years, and his words still carried the weight of epochs. "Admiral Okonkwo," he said, his voice measured and cold, "you stand before the oldest institution in the known galaxy. We have guided 1,000 species from darkness into enlightenment. We have prevented wars, brokered peace, and maintained order across 10,000 star systems. You arrive here with a fleet, unannounced and uninvited, and demand recognition as our equals. What makes you believe you have earned that right?" The holographic image of Okonkwo remained perfectly still. Behind her, the bridge of her ship continued its quiet operations, crew members moving with practiced efficiency, screens displaying data that the council's sensors couldn't help but notice was encrypted beyond their ability to crack. She took a breath, and when she spoke, her words carried the weight of an entire world. "Because we did what you thought was impossible," she said. "And we did it alone." The chamber stirred, but Okonkwo continued, her voice growing stronger. "You want to know how we got here? Fine. I'll tell you. 73 years ago we detected your first transmission. It was a simple navigation beacon from a Vel-3 mining convoy. To you it was background noise. To us, it was proof we weren't alone." She gestured, and with her permission the council's systems displayed a timeline, Earth's history compressed into a visual stream. "We could have announced ourselves immediately. Sent out a desperate signal begging for contact. But we didn't. Because we'd been watching our own history, and we knew what happened to civilizations that revealed themselves too soon. The conquistadors and the conquered. The colonizers and the colonized. We played both roles enough times to know how the story ends." The timeline shifted, showing a planet slowly changing. Cities spreading. Lights connecting. Borders fading. So instead we unified. Not through war, We tried that enough times to know it didn't work. Through necessity. Through the shared realization that if we didn't come together, someone else out here might decide our fate for us. Counselor Mira leaned forward, her expression intent. You feared us. We feared the unknown, Okonkwo corrected. And we prepared for it. We took your physics and made it ours. We studied your transmissions and learned your languages. We built our ships in silence, in the dark spaces of our own solar system where your sensors couldn't see. And yes, we watched you watch us and we let you believe we were still squabbling children playing with chemical rockets. Deception, Reth said again, his voice hard. Survival, Okonkwo shot back. You had 300 million years to perfect your society. We had 3 generations to catch up. You'll forgive us if we didn't announce every breakthrough to an audience that already decided we weren't ready. High Arbiter Cuvan's expression was unreadable. And now you believe you are ready? Okonkwo's smile returned, but this time there was no warmth in it. We're here, aren't we? The silence that followed was different from before. It wasn't shock anymore. It was calculation. Every species in that chamber was doing the same math, running the same scenarios. If humanity had advanced this far, this fast, while under observation, what else were they capable of? What other surprises waited in that fleet of 300 ships? It was Ambassador Silith who broke the quiet, her telepathic voice gentle but probing. You speak of survival, Admiral. But survival alone does not grant you the right to stand among us. What do you offer the galaxy? What makes humanity worthy of this council? Okonkwo straightened, and for the first time, something shifted in her expression. The steel remained, but beneath it, something else emerged, something that looked almost like hope. We offer what we've always offered, she said quietly. Adaptability. Resilience. The refusal to accept that anything is impossible. She gestured again and the holographic display changed. Images appeared, human cities, thriving in green. Orbital stations, massive and elegant. Ships under construction, sleek and powerful. But also, hospitals, schools, monuments to peace. Archives preserving 1,000 languages. Gardens growing food for billions. We're not perfect, Okonkwo continued. We're barely a century past our last global war. We still argue, still disagree, still struggle to understand each other. But we learned something you seem to have forgotten in your 300 million years of slow, careful progress. She looked directly at Cuvan. We learned that the universe doesn't wait for you to be ready. It doesn't care if you're worthy. It simply exists, vast and dangerous and beautiful, and it will move on whether you're part of it or not. Okonkwo took a step forward, and though it was only a holographic projection, every being in the chamber felt the weight of her presence. You can quarantine us. You can refuse us. You can try to force us back into our corner of space and pretend we'll quietly wait another 500 years for your approval. Her eyes gleamed. But we both know that's not going to happen. We didn't come here to ask permission. We came here to show you that the galaxy has changed. The question isn't whether humanity is ready for the council. She paused, letting the words hang in the air. The question is whether the council is ready for humanity. High Arbiter Cuvan stared at the human admiral for a long moment. Behind him, 47 species waited for his response, their thoughts a storm of fear, curiosity, anger, and, for some, something that might have been respect. Finally he spoke. We will deliberate. Your fleet will remain at the perimeter. Do not advance. Do not retreat. Simply, wait. Okonkwo inclined her head. We've been waiting for 73 years, High Arbiter. We can wait a little longer. The transmission ended. And in the silence that followed, the Galactic Council began the most important debate in its history, not about whether to accept humanity, but about what it meant that they no longer had the power to refuse. The universe changes course. The deliberation lasted 6 days. In the Galactic Council's long history, decisions had taken decades, sometimes centuries, to reach consensus. Wars had been prevented through patience. Treaties had been crafted with meticulous care. The Council prided itself on thoughtfulness, on the measured consideration of every angle, every consequence, every ripple that might spread across the fabric of civilization. 6 days was an eye blink. It was also an eternity. Outside the Council chamber, the human fleet maintained its position with unnerving precision. Not a single ship drifted. Not a single energy signature fluctuated. The formation held as perfectly on day 6 as it had on day 1, and that discipline, that control, sent a message louder than any weapon could. These were not the desperate ships of a species hoping for acceptance. These were the ships of a species that had already decided they belonged. Inside the chamber, the debate raged like a storm. They are a threat, insisted General Carvos of the Shin hegemony, a military power that had held dominance over 3 spiral arms for millennia. Not because they are aggressive but because they are unpredictable. Every model we have, every simulation, every historical precedent, all of it says that a species advancing this rapidly will either collapse or conquer. There is no middle ground. Your models, Counselor Mira replied calmly, were built on species that advanced slowly. You are trying to measure a supernova with tools designed for candles. Then what do you suggest? Carvos demanded. We simply accept them? Allow them full access to our networks, our technology, our worlds? What happens when they learn everything we know and decide they no longer need us? What happens, said a new voice, when they learn everything we know and decide to teach us something new? The speaker was Elder Tuan of the Architects, a species so ancient that their homeworld had been consumed by its star 1,000,000 years ago. They existed now as vast, distributed intelligences, their thoughts spread across quantum networks spanning entire star systems. When they spoke it was rare, and when they spoke the council listened. I have studied humanity's mathematics, Tuan continued, their voice a chorus of harmonics. I have analyzed their art, their literature, their philosophy. Do you know what I found? The chamber waited. Chaos, Tuan said. Beautiful, terrible, magnificent chaos. They do not think in straight lines. They do not wait for permission from history or logic or established wisdom. They improvise. They combine ideas that should not work together and create something entirely new. They are not like us, and that is precisely why they are valuable. Valuable? Wrath of the Korth scoffed. Or dangerous? Both, Tan replied simply. As are all things worth having. On the bridge of the UEC flagship Prometheus, Admiral Okonkwo watched the council chamber in silence. 6 days of waiting. 6 days of knowing that the fate of her entire species hung in the balance, decided by beings who had existed longer than human civilization, who viewed Earth's entire history as a footnote in their endless archives. Admiral, said her communications officer, a young woman named Chen. We're receiving multiple transmissions from Earth. The Assembly wants to know if we should prepare alternative strategies. Okonkwo smiled faintly. Tell them we wait. That's the strategy. And if they refuse us? They won't. Chen hesitated. How can you be sure? Okonkwo turned to look at her officer, and in her eyes was something that had carried humanity from caves to stars. Not certainty, but conviction. Because they're afraid, she said quietly. Not of our weapons or our ships. They're afraid that we might be right. That their way, slow, careful, controlled, isn't the only way. That 300 million years of tradition might not prepare you for a species that learned to split atoms before they learned to stop killing each other, and somehow survived anyway. She turned back to the view screen. They'll accept us. Not because they want to. Because they have to. Because the alternative is admitting that the universe is bigger and stranger than they've been willing to believe. Inside the council chamber, High Arbiter Cuven called for silence. The debate had circled back on itself a dozen times. Arguments repeated. Positions hardened. But beneath it all, a single truth had emerged, crystallized through days of discussion into something no one could ignore. Humanity was not going away. We have a choice to make, Cuven said, his voice carrying the weight of his office. Not about whether humanity deserves to be here, they have made that point sufficiently clear. Our choice is simpler and far more significant. He looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes, or equivalent sensory organs, of every delegation. Do we evolve or do we calcify? Do we remain a council that guides the galaxy forward, or do we become a museum, preserving the past while the future moves on without us? Ambassador Silith's telepathic voice whispered through every mind. You believe accepting them will change us? I believe, Cuven replied, that they have already changed us. The moment they arrived, the moment they proved that our assumptions about the pace of civilization were wrong, we changed. The question is whether we acknowledge that change, or spend the next 1,000 years pretending it didn't happen. He straightened, and when he spoke again, his voice held the authority of 300 million years of history. I call for a vote. All in favor of granting humanity provisional membership in the Galactic Council, with full rights and responsibilities, indicate now. The chamber filled with light. Not unanimously, the Korth delegation remained dark as did several others. But the majority glowed with assent, species after species acknowledging what they'd resisted for 6 days. The universe had changed. And the council would change with it. When Admiral Okonkwo received the transmission, she didn't celebrate. She didn't cheer. She simply nodded as if confirming something she'd always known. Communications, she said calmly. Signal the fleet. Stand down to diplomatic configuration. And send a message to Earth. What should it say, Admiral? Okonkwo smiled, a real smile this time, warm and genuine. Tell them we're coming home. And we're not coming back alone. Epilogue, 1 year later. The council chamber had changed. A new alcove had been added, carved from the same crystallized spacetime as the rest, but different somehow, younger, sharper, still settling into its place. Inside it sat Ambassador James Morrison of Earth, a former physicist who'd spent his career searching for signals from the stars and never imagined he'd be answering them himself. Today's session was routine. A trade dispute between the Velthri and the Lysan. Resources, territories, the usual complexities. But Morrison noticed something as the debate unfolded. The arguments were sharper now. More creative. Species that had relied on ancient precedent for millennia were suddenly proposing new solutions, unconventional approaches, ideas that would have been dismissed as reckless a year ago. Counselor Mira caught his eye and sent a private telepathic message. Your species has made us uncomfortable, Ambassador Morrison. He sent back a thought, uncertain if he was doing it correctly. I apologize. Don't. Her mental voice held something that might have been amusement. Comfort is the enemy of growth. We'd forgotten that. You reminded us. Morrison smiled. Because that was the secret humanity had brought to the stars. Not superior technology or military might or diplomatic cunning. They'd brought the simple, revolutionary idea that the universe didn't require you to be ready. It only required you to try. Far across the galaxy, on a small monitoring station orbiting an unremarkable star, a young Korth technician noticed something unusual in the sensor logs. Another world. Another species. Early industrial age, barely developing radio technology. According to all the models, they had at least 1,000 years before they'd be ready for contact. The technician prepared to file the standard report, catalog and observe, maintain quarantine protocols. Then she hesitated. She thought about the humans, about their impossible fleet, about the admiral who'd stood before the council and refused to apologize for being audacious. And for the first time in her career, she added a note to the file. Recommend accelerated observation. This species shows signs of rapid adaptation. Traditional timelines may not apply.